debris. The detective who found the fragment was called to the witness stand and asked to explain himself. The judges found his attempts at worst evasive and at best confusing, and said he gave no satisfactory explanation for what had happened. But they accepted the fragment was embedded within the cloth when it was found. We hoped to interview the detective, but he declined, saying he wanted to put it all behind him. It remains unclear who changed the label and why. For some, the revelation about the timer fragment only added to the suspicion that evidence had been tampered with, however much it's denied by the investigators.
Based on my knowledge, it's absolutely not true. Absolutely, positively not true. I'm not aware of anybody in the Scottish Police, in the CIA, or the FBI that knows anything about planting evidence or about framing a particular suspect in this case. We followed the evidence, and that's all we did. And I would say, other than someone to make an allegation, I'd like to see them back it up, because I can promise you it did not happen.
When the Swiss businessman Edwin Bollier appeared in court, much of his evidence was dismissed by the judges as being self-contradictory. He never did get a reward from the Americans, but he's still hoping he'll make something. If he could help get al-Megrahi released, he says the Libyans have agreed to give him a payout, a substantial payout.
This is true, yes.
And you were hoping to get this reward?
Yes.
How big was the reward?
This is 200,000, 200 millions.
$200 million?
Yeah.
So if you could get Megrahi out of prison, the Libyans would pay you $200 million?
I hope.
Are you still hoping that they might pay you this?
Possible.
As the trial progressed, a rumor spread through the press room that the prosecution had a star witness.
In one of these cars is a witness from Libya who could decide the outcome of Britain's biggest murder trial.
But when he finally appeared, this mystery Libyan provoked suspicions that the CIA was ramping up its evidence. Majeed Jakka was a Libyan informer who had been recruited by the CIA. He knew the two men in the dock and could apparently pin the charge on them.
There was this great celebration that we have the smoking gun, and it was the Libyans. And so, and everybody was convinced that this was going to hold up in court.
Michael Scharf first heard of Jakka when he was an attorney at the State Department. At the time, he was drafting the case to go before the UN Security Council for sanctions against Libya. Scharf was tipped off about a secret CIA informer in the heart of the plot to blow up Pan Am.
He was the one that could go into the courtroom and say, I worked with these individuals, they were ordered to blow up Pan Am 103, I saw them with the explosives, and I saw them put it on the plane.
This much is true. 6 months before Lockerbie, Jakka had walked into the American embassy on Malta, offering his services for a fee. He said he was an agent in the feared Libyan External Security Service and boasted of having been trained by the KGB. The CIA were impressed. They gave him the code name Puzzle Piece and cabled Langley with the good news.
He impressed us as intelligent, serious, and a fairly well-composed individual under the circumstances.
Before the trial, under the rules of disclosure, the prosecution was obliged to share all significant information about witnesses with the defense. The prosecution did hand over secret CIA cables about Jakka, but some sections had been blacked out, and other cables from his case file were missing altogether. The reason? There was talk of national security being at stake. We can reveal the information which the CIA tried to keep secret, but was eventually forced to disclose. Majeed Jakka was not so much 007, more WD-40. This secret agent had started out in the carpool, and that was the nearest he'd ever got to driving an Aston Martin.
Jakka has never been a true staff member of the Libyan External Security Organization. He has been a shirker, while in Malta, generally dodging external security organization assignments.
This informer was being paid $1,000 a month, rising to $1,500, to meet his CIA handlers in a Malta safe house. Langley even paid for a sham operation on his arm so he could avoid military service back home in Libya. But Jakka never delivered the goods.
We believe Jakka is becoming desperate and is certainly milking all of his contacts, including us, for whatever he can get.
My moment was like, wow. They didn't tell us anything like that. The CIA knew all along that this guy was a liar, that this guy was just out for money, that they didn't believe half of what he said, if any of what he said, and yet they were presenting him as the star witness in a case that is of such importance. So for me, that was really an eye-opening moment, a shocking moment.
When Jakka took the stand behind a screen to protect his identity, he described how he had seen al-Megrahi and Fahima at Lucca airport with a brown suitcase. Apparently, Jakka had first recalled this handy lead 3 years after the event, and after the CIA had whisked him away from Malta in a speedboat, given him and his wife a new identity and a new life in America under a witness protection program. The judges were not impressed. Nor was the man who'd been told to put his faith in the CIA's secret Libyan agent.
We have to take it as a matter of trust, and we go into the Security Council and we make the case, and they trust us because they have no reason to think that we're lying. And I have to say, you know, years later, that I feel that I played a role similar to that of Colin Powell after the invasion of Iraq, where he went in and said that we had open and shut evidence of weapons and mass destruction, and now today he feels like that ruined his career. Didn't ruin my career, but it's a moment that I'm not proud of.
The Libyan informer may have failed to live up to expectation, but the real star witness was a Maltese shopkeeper named Tony Gauci. He owned the men's outfitters Mary's House, where, according to the prosecution, the clothes wrapped around the bomb had come from. Investigators believed al-Megrahi bought at least 13 items to pack around the bomb. Amazingly, in the wreckage they recovered more than 40 fragments from those items. It's been claimed that Tony Gauci was a victim of a conspiracy to lead the witness. So, does that allegation stand up to scrutiny?
When we were presented with the Gauci evidence, they said that there was a shopkeeper who could do a definitive eyewitness account, placing the defendant at the scene, buying the clothes that were found in the suitcase that contained the bomb.
Police officers visited the shopkeeper and took a statement 19 times over 3 years. Some of those statements do contradict each other.
I am sure I did not sell him a shirt. That man didn't buy any shirts, for sure.
Then, some months later, when the police had identified this fragment of a shirt, which they believed was in the suitcase with the bomb,
I now remember that the man who bought the clothing also bought a beige slalom shirt.
For skeptics, a pattern was beginning to emerge in the trial. Leaving aside the questions over his statements, could Tony Gauci identify the suspect, al-Megrahi? Gauci told police he saw the mystery shopper in a local bar some months after the Lockerbie attack. And he said another time the Libyan actually returned to his shop to buy a white dress. On both occasions, there is no record of al-Megrahi being on Malta.
It was very clear at that point that he was not a definitive eyewitness, that he had thought that other people may have bought the clothes, that he was never sure that the defendant was the guy. In fact, the most definitive statement he had was, yeah, that guy sort of resembles the person who bought it.
11 years after the event, whilst al-Megrahi was awaiting trial, Gauci attended an ID parade and picked him out correctly as number 5. In their verdict, the judges said the ID parade took place in August 1999. But this is not true. It actually happened on the 13th of April that year. The date is significant because just 4 days before, Gauci showed the Maltese police this magazine photograph of al-Megrahi.